My name is Helen Canton. I'm a senior physiotherapist working for Airedale NHS Trust based at Skipton Hospital. I'd like to talk to you about bone health and osteoporosis. The word osteoporosis means spongy or porous bones and is basically thinning of the bones. It is called the silent disease because you don't know you have it until you have a fracture. This affects 1 in 3 women and 1 in 5 men. There is, however, lots you can do to develop good strong bones, and a really important time is for kids and adolescents, since this is a key time for bone development. If you've been diagnosed with osteoporosis, you can still strengthen your bones because it is a living tissue. We have a new skeleton every 7 to 10 years. So what is osteoporosis? The structured bone is like a chocolate crunchy bar, solid on the outside and like a honeycomb on the inside. Bone is made of protein hardened by calcium salts. Since bone is a living tissue, within our bone we have cells that build the bone and cells that break down the bone. So it is a balance between the breakdown of old bone and the formation of new bone. When we are young, there is more bone building activity. Your peak bone mass is in your mid to late 20s. From the age of puberty, so roughly about 10-11, until your 20s is the key time to develop strong bones. After this, new bone is produced at the same rate as the older bone is broken down. For women at the age of 40, bone is broken down more quickly than it's replaced, which then increases at menopause, where a reduction in the hormone estrogen reduces the amount of bone being built. In men, this occurs after the age of 70, and they are more at risk due to a reduction in the hormone testosterone, which supports bone formation. So in osteoporosis, the skeleton weakens, and going back to our honeycomb analogy, the spaces become larger. This means there's increased risk of fractures or broken bones with less force, for example, a slight bump. The common fracture sites are the wrist, the upper arm, hip, pelvis, and the spine. And the first fracture is the warning sign. So there's a number of factors that mean that you may be more at risk of developing osteoporosis. Firstly, if you've taken steroids for a long time, say more than 3 months, for example, if you have rheumatoid arthritis or you've been treated for polymyalgia rheumatica, because steroids reduce calcium absorbed in your gut. If you had an early menopause under the age of 45, or a hysterectomy where your ovaries were removed. If you have diabetes, then this affects bone health. Also, a lack of weight-bearing activity, or you live a sedentary lifestyle. So there are studies that have looked at women who sit for more than 9 hours a day, and they have a 50% increased risk of a hip fracture than those that sit for less than 6 hours a day. A poor diet. There's a lack of calcium in your diet. Smoking stops the construction cells and has an early effect on bone mass. Studies that have looked at smokers aged 18 to 20 years found that there was a reduced bone mineral density, in the bones of those people that were smoking. Alcohol is toxic, and that affects bone formation. And then other conditions that affect the absorption of calcium in the gut, if you have celiacs or Crohn's, ulcerative colitis. And finally, being an astronaut. You can lose up to 10% of the bone mass in 6 months, and it takes them 3 to 4 years to recover. So to reduce the risk, it's really important to exercise in space. So what can I do to improve my bone health? The key is weight-bearing exercise. Walking, running, going to the gym, dancing, but it's got to be something you enjoy doing. If your main exercise is swimming, cycling, horse riding, then these are not weight-bearing activities. Exercise that works on posture and balance, such as Tai Chi, are important when you are older to help reduce the risk of falls. You need to look at our diet. We need to get calcium, which we can get through dairy products, fish, leafy green vegetables, beans, chickpeas, nuts, seeds, and dried fruit. We also need protein, which we can get in lean meat, pulses, and grains. In order for calcium to be absorbed into our bones, we need vitamin D. And the recommendation is that we access sunlight 10 to 15 minutes per day in the peak sunlight hours. Vitamin D can also be found in oily fish and additives in cereal. If you're a smoker, you must stop smoking. And then in terms of alcohol, it's important to monitor your alcohol levels. More than 2 units a day increases the risk of osteoporosis, and 2 units is basically 1 can of beer or a standard glass of wine. If you're consuming more than 4 units, then you double the risk of developing osteoporosis. So after a diagnosis of osteoporosis, you should do more exercise, not less. Exercise will not cause you to have a fracture. You just need to modify your exercise. So avoid repeated bending or rotation exercises. Even minimal exercise will slow down the loss of bone. There's a great resource on the National Osteoporosis Society website, and you can find exercise sheets and also exercise videos that you can join in. And these address bone and muscle strength, balance, which is really important if you want to progress your exercises, that you've got good balance to reduce the risk of falls. There's exercises for back pain after spinal fractures, posture exercises, information about moving and lifting safely. And also, if you enjoy Pilates, there's some information on how to modify your Pilates exercises when you have osteoporosis. As I mentioned before, exercises need to be weight bearing, but we also need muscle strengthening, where the muscles pull on the bone, so helping the bones to become stronger. So you need to have some form of resistance. That can be your body weight, it can be exercise bands, and also to progressively increase the load. Variety is good for bone health, so different movements, directions, and speeds. If we consider the level of exercise, there's no evidence that impact exercises will cause a spinal fracture. But to be on the safe side, if you have a spinal fracture, aim for lower impact exercises. So by this we mean walking, then progressing on to brisk walking, marching, stair climbing. And if you're doing high impact exercises and experience no pain, then this is safe for you. We talk about moderate exercises, then that would be dancing, jogging, team or racket sports. And then the high intensity exercises involve jumping. So this would be your volleyball and your basketball, lots of jumping and changing direction. It's also important to consider upper body strengthening as well, to start with wall press-ups and then progressing onto ordinary press-ups onto all fours, exercising with hand weights. Your body adapts to the load it's exposed to, so do not suddenly increase the amount of exercise you do. Exercise regularly to have any benefit. You need to exercise regularly to have any benefit. So the government guidelines recommend 150 minutes of moderate intensity exercise for adults. So this is only 30 minutes 5 times a week. For older adults, they recommend in addition to this that 2 sessions of balance exercises are done to reduce the risk of falls. For children, an hour a day of moderate physical activity is recommended. A little muscle stiffness after exercise is normal if you've done more than usual, but it's really important that you do not experience persistent pain after exercise. I did a talk at a local GP practice, and a lady came up to me who'd been diagnosed with osteoporosis. She'd had a fall and she sustained a spinal fracture, and this was diagnosed, she was diagnosed with osteoporosis on a scan. In response to this, she decided to make changes in her lifestyle, and this involved changing her diet, reducing her alcohol intake, and increasing her exercise. So she would go out for a daily brisk walk and also attend regular Pilates classes. The next time she had a checkup, the scan showed that she had no longer got osteoporosis, and this is a lady in her 70s. She was diagnosed osteopenia. So that's the midpoint between healthy bones and osteoporosis, where the bones are weaker than normal, but not so weak that they could fracture. So she'd improved her bone health through lifestyle changes, and I felt that this was really inspirational. So the good news is that osteoporosis is completely preventable. through addressing exercise, diet and lifestyle. Thank you for listening.